welcome to Movement Not Miracles. Martha's timing is impeccable. Just as I pressed start, she got up and jumped off the table, but there you go, not to worry. So I'm Anna from Eat, Move, Be Happy, and Movement Not Miracles is your bite-sized version of some ideas on how to keep your joints mobile, stretch through some of your muscles and ward off some of those aches and pains that we can get from sitting still for too long. And today is all about hips, and it looks like Martha's going to join in. So hips, hips and more hips today. So we're going to work through some hip mobility stuff, which most of you will be able to do. I'm going to do some work on the floor. You should be able to, well, you will be able to do some of it sitting in a chair. You don't have to use the floor. I'm just avoiding chairs because I've been sitting still some of the morning. And we're also going to do some stretching through our hips as well. And you will notice that I'm sitting cross-legged to start off with. And actually, sitting cross-legged is in itself a good way of just encouraging our hips to move and not stay in that. Martha, you are going to have to move out of the way because people can't see. So if you imagine, if I was sitting in a chair, I would be sitting with my legs out at 90 degrees to my body. So I've got a nice 90-degree angle there, typically. We might even find that we sort of sit and slump back. So you sit on that fleshy part of your bum and you sort of sit like this. But mostly your legs and your hips are in this sort of a position. Whereas if you sit cross-legged, showing you from the side, straight away you're encouraging some more rotation through your thigh bone and through your hip joint. So sitting cross-legged, sitting nice and tall, up out of your pelvis, is a nice way just to encourage some more movement in your hips. And make sure you rotate the angle of the cross, so you have one foot forward. So if you always sit with your right foot in front, then you get a slight imbalance. So make sure you mix and match. So just to start off with, if you are sitting in a chair, if you can cross your legs, then do safely. But just to start off with, we're just going to round down and imagine, we may as well have a netball. For those of you that don't know, I coach netball as well, Craven Dragons netball. We're not playing netball at the moment, although I did have a dream that we played netball last night. We've not played for nearly a year, which is very disappointing, but we will get back to it. We will, if there are any dragons watching, we will get back to it, girls. So, netball, imagine there's a netball sitting in your lap, and I want you to think of sort of rounding down over that netball, just nice and gently. So you might feel a bit of a stretch through your back and into the outer parts of your hips, just nice and gently to start off with. And then we're going to change the cross of your cross-legged sit and do exactly the same. And just rounding down. And nice relaxed breathing. And then if you're sitting in a chair, you can still do this, or you can do this standing. I'm going to do this lying down. So we're going to work on pulling your leg up towards your chest. So if you're lying down, it supports the rest of your body. So you're going to be pulling your leg, your knee to your chest, rather than bringing your chest to your knee. If you're standing or sitting, make sure your body stays upright and your knees coming into your chest. So again, in normal sitting, we wouldn't get this type of movement through our hip. So you might feel a bit of a stretch through the back of your thigh, your hamstring, and into your bottom. But we're going for hip mobility rather than stretch at the moment. So hugging that knee in, keeping keeping breathing relaxed through the body. Oh, actually, you may as well twizzle the ankles while you're here. Get some ankle mobility at the same time. We're going to do that again on this side, and you might get a little bit more movement this time. And then again on the other side. Okay, so now you do need to be able, for this one, to be able to kneel on the floor. So make sure you are kneeling on something that is solid. You might need a bit of a cushion. I'm on a yoga mat, just trying to get so that I'm in shot. So heel in line with the front of the knee, and you want your heel a reasonable distance from your leg so that you're aiming for that shin to be vertical. Now, the closer your heel is to your knee, you can see now that's working on the flexibility in my ankle rather than any movement through my hip. So that's not wrong, but this particular move we want to be working on hips. So take your foot a little bit further away from your knee. And you're aiming on keeping that knee back. So we don't want that knee leaning forwards. If I show you from the side as well. So that foot is there and that knee is back. So we don't want that knee sticking out like that. We're working hard. And if you just poke your bottom, you should feel that muscle contracting to keep that knee back. So I'll show you this way so that you can see what happens next. So setup's important. Now, make sure this hip is pushed forwards. So you're working through the glute on, happens to be my right side, to keep your bottom forward, and the glute on the left side to keep that knee back. So that in itself, you should feel some opening up of your hips there. And then you're going to lean the whole of your body. Think of pushing your body that way towards the toe that's pointing away from you with your glutes. So think of leaning into the foot, your knee that's bent, not the knee that's supporting you. So you can see the angle has changed here. Now you're going to feel some stretch down this leg and into the groin of this leg. And when you get as far as you can go, I want you to think of pushing this groin into the floor, keeping that pelvis forwards. So if I show you from the side, we don't want our bottom sticking out like this. You're working quite hard through that glute to push this hip forwards. So when you lean away from you, that is still pushing forwards. We're not letting this happen, and we're not leaning into it. The minute you lean in, you close that hip off. So we're trying to keep the hip open, lean, and then drive that hip down to the floor. And then a couple of breaths whilst you're in this position. And then we'll do the same on the other side. So set up, important. Heel in line with the knee. Hip forward, working through your glute behind. Knee back, working through the outside of this glute to keep that knee back. Nice and relaxed through the upper body, shoulders away from the ears, and then using your glute to push yourself forwards towards your toes. And then when you get as far as you can go, drive that groin down into the floor. You're not going to get much movement there. It's more thinking of that action. It just increases the movement through this hip and a bit more of a stretch on the inside of this groin. Keeping that knee back, you should feel a stretch down the inside of your thigh here. Right, we're going to do that once more on each side, just because the second time is always better, and your hips already now should be feeling a little bit more open and a little bit more mobile. So set up on this side, hip pointing forwards, leaning into it, driving down towards the floor. I've got a little bit more movement this time. It's almost like, one, you know what to expect, two, your head knows what to expect, and three, your muscles are a little bit more stretched and ready for the second time. Okay, swap round and lean forward. Make sure your hip is forwards. This one's always a bit stiffer on my side. You will have one side that's stiffer than the other, and that's okay. Most of us do. It's just a case of working to minimise that. Okay, now we're going to stretch through our hip flexors, the front of our hips here. And if you think when we're sitting, these are really short, so the muscle is shortened. And actually, these are the muscles that help that lifting up movement. And if they become tight, then they can restrict the movement in your hips, which can impact on your back and your knees. So I'm going to do, well, in fact, we'll do the first one first. It's always good to do the first one first, which is the slightly easier version. So this time, hips facing forwards. Again, kneeling on one leg and pelvis in. So just tilting that pelvis forward, you can see a nice straight line through the front of my hip there. So my bum is not sticking out and there's no angle. So I'm really driving that hip forwards, and I can feel a stretch already there. And then I'm just going to take my body, my whole of my body forwards to feel a stretch down the front of my thigh. Now, if you've got particularly tight thigh muscles, quad muscles, then you might not get into your hip flexor until they've relaxed a little bit. Mine are behaving themselves today, so that's quite good, a stretch for me. I can feel it in my hip flexors. I'm going to swap sides. So I'll show you from this side, and then you can see what happens. So you tilt your pelvis forward, really straightening through the front of my other hip, and then moving the whole of my body. It's not a big move. I'm thinking moving with your butt, and I'm not bending my body, so my body's staying upright. If you bend your body, you should feel that the stretch goes completely out of that hip flexor. Now, if that's quite a deep stretch for you, and you're finding that hard work, that's fine. You don't need to do this one. However, if you find you can stand a little bit more of a stretch, this is a much deeper stretch, still stretching through your hip flexors, and I'm going to use the wall. You can use any solid surface to rest your foot on. So sometimes a sofa is a good height, sometimes a bench, anything that's not going to move. You don't want it to slip away from underneath you, but we're going to go for the closer your knee is to whatever you are using as support, then the deeper this stretch. And it can be quite a deep and intense stretch, so go steady in your setup. So I've just folded my mat up so that I've got some support on that knee, and I'm folded down through my body so I haven't got the stretch in my hip flexor yet. But as I stand my body up, it's really a nice deep stretch into, Martha, please will you move out the way, thank you, the front of that quad. Now this is more in my quad at the moment because they're not giving in. I'm still trying to drive my hips forward, so tilt my pelvis to get into the top of my hip flexor. But it's a nice deep stretch in my quad as well. My heel is very nearly touching my, well, in fact it is touching my bottom now. Martha, you're right in the way. Just stand that side. There we go. And just nice deep breaths as that muscle relaxes, or as the muscles relax. And then we'll do the same on the other side. I can't put both legs up at the same time. So the closer your knee is to the wall, the deeper the stretch is. Up you come. And interestingly, this leg is much tighter. I need to do a bit more work on this, clearly. I I can't get my body as upright. I knew there was a reason I was doing these today. So just breathe, relax through the rest of your body. And as you feel the muscles relaxing, see if you can drive those hips forward a little bit more and get into the hip flexor. It's not really in my hip flexor yet, it's in my quad. But they clearly need to stretch, so that's okay. Okay, they're giving up a little bit. See if I can, my heel is not quite on my butt on this side. So interestingly, this right hip is stiffer, but the left quad is tighter. So I'm wonky on both sides. Okay, we'll relax out of that. And then the final one for today, I'm just going to show you a different stretch. This one is Piriformis. So we're going to sit nice and tall. If you are sitting in a chair, you can bring one leg up and rest your ankle on your thigh and work to just encourage that knee down towards the floor, and you should feel a stretch in the outside of your hip there, and that's what we're working for. So if you are sitting on the floor, you take that leg over, resting your foot on your knee and hugging that knee into your chest, back nice and straight, so you're sitting on the bones of your bottom. Now I can feel a nice big stretch in the outside of my hip there, and just for good measure, if you push your hand on the floor behind you and try and twist your chest around to increase that stretch and get a bit of a twist in your back. Really hug that knee in tight and relax. It's a nice stretch for the outside of our hip, this one. So if your muscles are tight around your hips, you're not going to get as much movement through the joint, because the muscles will restrict that. So keeping your muscles stretched and flexible helps with the mobility in the joint. But keeping your muscles strong also helps with the stability of the joint. So it's important to think about both. We're swapping sides. So I'll stay this side so you can see the foot placement and see how far I can twist round. So I'm trying to keep my back straight, knee is hugged into the chest, breathing, twisting round. Don't hold your breath, keep breathing and hugging that knee in tight. Okay, so hopefully your hips will feel a little bit more stretched, a little bit more movement through them. Don't forget to sit cross-legged at some points throughout the day. It's a really nice way of looking after our hip mobility, if you can do it. And Movement Not Miracles is your bite-sized version. You can do these. It's a little bit harder to just do hip mobility stuff if you are in an office or haven't got a yoga mat to hand. But some of the mobility stuff you can do, hugging the knee up to the chest, for example, sitting cross-legged, just moving around. Don't sit for long periods of time. That really does help with our general mobility. So check out the website www.eatmovebehappy.com, and we have a full list, a full video archive of the other sessions that I've done, so you can go back and look at those and do some of those throughout the day. But keeping moving is the key. So hopefully your hips will feel good, and check out the website for our other online coaching around eating and exercise habits and looking after your mental health. And let us know how you're getting on. I will see you back with Movement Not Miracles tomorrow. Thank you.